Hello and welcome back to another DF Retro hardware episode. Today we're looking at the Capcom Home Arcade arcade stick. And to do that, I'm joined by my good friend Audi, who's here with me, checking it out.
Yeah, thanks for having me back.
Of course, we've been playing a lot of games on this thing. You guys have probably seen it. It's the Capcom logo in the form of an arcade stick.
It's a very interesting design.
It is certainly an interesting design choice. But we spent the last day or so playing around with all the different games on this thing, and I have a lot of thoughts, as I think you do as well, on this product. Some good, some bad, some mixed, but overall, yeah, it's super interesting.
Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by this thing. I hadn't heard of it before you showed it to me, but yeah, this was an interesting couple of days.
All right, so basically the idea here is everything is built into this unit. We've seen these before. There's some Chinese clones and whatnot that do the same kind of thing with different software and whatnot. But basically they put 16 Capcom games running on their CPS-1 and CPS-2 board embedded onto a small system on a chip of some sort, which outputs over HDMI to your TV. The best part about this thing though is the fact that even though the design is a bit yeah, it's, you know, controversial, we'll say, the actual build quality is superb. So like the parts, for instance.
Yeah, it uses Sanwa parts, which is very impressive.
It's a proper arcade style joystick that is a joy to use. And beyond that, it has a nice weight to it. The surface, the sort of plasticky surface, has like smooth edges on it. It's comfortable on your wrists. It feels good when you're playing. And the base itself uses sort of a soft touch plastic, a bit rubberized, I guess you could say.
Yeah.
So the whole thing just feels nice.
It's important to note too that it has two controllers on it, two joysticks, and it emphasizes multiplayer. It doesn't slide around thanks to this design.
Yes, exactly. The plastic choice, the rubberized material helps it avoid sliding around, basically.
Which we were kind of concerned about.
Exactly, because you're kind of manhandling the controls a little bit. It stays in place, so it's solid in that sense. On the back you have the USB power input, HDMI video out, and then the curious extension port.
Yeah, no idea what that's
Which is, you pull off the little tab here and it's a full-size USB port. There's nothing mentioned in the manual. We'll have to see what this leads to later, what this means. But for now, it's sort of a mystery, at least at the time of filming this.
Yeah, we have some thoughts, but we're not sure, so we shouldn't really.
Exactly. So then you pull it out. It's, by the way, it's really nicely packaged as well in the box. The foam inserts sort of keep everything in place. It's a really nicely thought out package. Inside, there's this small board housing the various chips for the unit. So there's an ARM processor here under the heatsink, a Kingston 4GB memory chip for storing the software, and then of course the Wi-Fi chip over here. But one of the more interesting things is a lot of these mini consoles, which this is kind of a part of, even though it's much larger, they output 720p, but this is a 1080p output, which suggests that it uses a more capable system on a chip than usual. Then there's the software side and emulation side of things. So they're using a Linux-based system with a custom UI sort of crafted on top specifically for the stick. And when you launch one of the games, it drops into RetroArch, using a custom config kind of designed for each game. But the emulation core itself, I think, has been somewhat of a touchy subject leading up to release. And we still don't have all the details, but just we know that the emulation was provided by Barry Harris, who was involved with the Final Burn Alpha project. But since FBA isn't explicitly mentioned, and maybe there's been some changes and tweaks, it's hard to say exactly what's in here. That's kind of all that I think we can say about that without knowing more. So let's talk about the experience of actually, setting this thing up and playing the games. You're greeted by these boot up logos and then dropped into the main system UI. And the first impression on that is not the best in the sense that it looks visually nice, but the menu itself is a bit choppy. Scrolling through the games, very low frame rate. And same goes for when you go up here and navigate into the settings menu. There's a bunch of options here. You can change the display type, and we'll look at more of this later, but there's different ways to display the game. There's also factory reset as an option. You can test the controls, which is cool. Sort of, I guess if there's a potential fault, you can determine that all the buttons function.
Actually shows on screen which
shows
buttons
on
pressing,
screen.
So.
But the weirdest thing is the firmware update and Wi-Fi support.
Yeah, or lack of support right now.
Yeah, so we tried multiple Wi-Fi connections, including my own personal router, using a hotspot on the phone. You would enter the Wi-Fi key as normal, and it would say connecting, and then nothing would happen.
Yeah,
it would just kick you right back to that menu, and that's it. Not really sure what's up with that, so I wasn't able to even check if the firmware could be updated. Maybe their servers aren't online, but I'm not sure. It never lit up the Wi-Fi
it never
connection
connected
symbol.
to the Wi-Fi, so even if the server's not up, we should have seen a connection, I think. But
yeah,
because it's a pre-release, we can't really say.
Exactly. So that is that. Maybe that extension port allows for USB updatable via like a file. That's also possible as well.
So even though the menu isn't that smooth, we should note that the actual look of it is very attractive. The vectorized logos on every game.
Yes.
You have some background art from the game. It's very stylish. It's very well done. It's better than some of the mini consoles.
Yeah, and I like how when you select each game, it sort of plays music from the associated game. So it does kind of feel like you're getting into it in that sense. It works.
You certainly get a taste of how Capcom sound did mature over the age.
Yeah,
there's
some of it is a bit shrill.
Difference. Yeah.
Before we talk about the games themselves, there isn't really much of an in-game menu. You can hit the coin and start button together and you get this screen here. And you can basically restart the game, resume, or quit. But when you quit, it actually has to reboot the unit. So you get those initial startup screens every time, and it always goes back to the first game in the list, which it's not horrible, but it does take a little extra time.
It's like 25 seconds every time.
Yeah, I guess there was no way to, whatever the hardware is there, they weren't able to seamlessly pull that off where you could move in and out of the menu system.
It's a minor
quibble, but something to note.
Yeah.
But the games themselves. So let's talk about the games and the emulation that we observed.
Right.
And one of the weird problems that sort of appeared and then disappeared.
Yeah, we should note that because we were playing 1942.
Yes.
Which was made by Rising.
Yeah, Rising.
From, Bloody Roar fame.
Exactly. And also Battle Garega and various other shooters.
All these great shooters. Very fun game, but we did notice stuttering kind of early on.
Yeah, about in level 2. You can see it here in the video. You kind of get these little hitches and stutters in the video.
So this is where we kind of figured maybe there's a firmware update. Maybe we need to check this out.
We didn't check right away though, because we continued to play games.
That's true.
And those also exhibited these same skips.
Yeah, it persisted through the 3 games we played.
And it wasn't like it was consistent in the sense that it kept happening like in rapid succession. It's more like they would randomly pop up while you're playing. It was a little distracting.
We thought it had something to do with the refresh rate of the games.
Right. But after doing a factory reset in an attempt to fix the Wi-Fi issue, it cleared up this problem entirely.
It's strange, isn't it?
And now all the games run without hitching. So that's a weird quirk that I'm going to have to kind of keep an eye on. Yeah. But at least it seems like it is possible to run perfectly. But if you do encounter these sort of hitches and skips, it might be worth trying the factory reset, even though that sort of resets whatever scores you may have saved.
Yeah, do it when you open this box and first plug it in, maybe factory reset, just to be sure.
And also, the online function allows you to upload scores and such.
Yes,
but we couldn't test that because the Wi-Fi wasn't working. So
I love the idea, though.
The idea is cool. So the games then. We played a lot of games on this thing, and I have to say, as one of these re-release consoles, I actually think this has one of the strongest lineups to date because it feels like the curators here went back through Capcom's arcade history and didn't just say, well, let's get all the popular stuff in every version of Street Fighter. They were like, what are the interesting games from Capcom's history that maybe not many people have played or they haven't received that much attention? And they've tossed them on here into this really interesting package that spans a decent amount of time.
Yeah, because between you and I mean, we are lifelong gamers, and especially Capcom is pretty dear to us. And between us, there's like the wisdom of 1,000 Men and 10 Horses. We know most Capcom games,
Yeah.
but there were some games here that we were not familiar with, and we were pleasantly surprised.
Yes, like Powered Gear is, or what is it? What do they call
Armored
it?
Warriors, was it?
Armored Warriors. It has
Yeah.
2 names depending on the region. This one, I've seen it before. It's on the Switch belt-scrolling
Yes.
collection. It's certainly not an unknown title, but I've not really heard a lot of discussion around this game.
I never really booted up.
And I never
no.
really spent a lot of time with it. But we sat down in 2-player mode, and this feels like the beat 'em up or the belt scroller sort of perfected in some ways.
This was one of the greatest surprises we had because, my God, was this game good.
It's just got this remarkable sense of momentum and speed. The animation is so smooth and fluid. You're dashing across the screen. You're picking up parts and using them, equipping them.
The music was like a long-lost Mega Man X soundtrack.
It sounds like a Mega Man X soundtrack. There's just this tremendous feeling to it that's really... I couldn't believe how energetic and smooth it feels to play.
Fast-paced,
It was
smooth.
really good.
Yeah, there's lots of variation in the robot designs. The robots you play as are modular, so you can build different parts on it and make your robot stronger.
Exactly.
It's just a lot more depth and a lot more fun than the usual belt
Yes,
scroller.
because at this point, so belt scrollers had been around for a while, and belt scrollers, like Turtles, Capcom's own Final Fight, even Streets of Rage. One of the things that these have done, they kind of fell into this groove of you sort of walk into a scene, the screen freezes, you fight a few guys, and then you continue. Whereas here, first of all, there's variety in the actual level design. Sometimes there was a scene where you're on this a high-speed shooting sequence.
Yes.
There's times where you join together and you control the same mech at once.
Yeah, you build like this giant
Which is
Voltron.
crazy. But then also, when you do lock into an area with enemies, with the dashing and the large sprites, they actually allow the screen to continue to scroll. So you're actually scrolling left and right during these
During the
moments.
fights, yeah.
So it makes the battlefield itself feel larger, and you feel much faster in terms of getting around the battlefield.
Yeah, it was a much more dynamic game than the usual belt scroller.
So yeah, in that sense, it really feels like it kind of. I'm sad that I missed this back in the day because it's a really impressive game.
But it speaks to this device though, because now we've discovered it. And
Exactly.
That's one of the first discoveries we have this.
And now the thing about CPS 1 and 2 games is the resolution is a bit weird.
Yeah.
They are usually 384 pixels wide, I think, by 224, which means that they actually have a wide picture aspect ratio, or pixel aspect ratio, I guess. But they're meant to be 4:3. And you have various options in the menu. You can either go for the 4:3 size. There is the full, and then there's like the stretch.
smooth?
There's also smoothing, but I don't yet. I think there's like possibly there's the 2 wider options that are interesting. I preferred 4:3, and so you can stretch it wide, or you can view it in 4:3. And there's no filtering on the pixel scaling, and it's not 100% even. And it also seems to vary per game. There's a few shooters that have a different resolution possibly, or the scaling is handled differently. So basically when you get scrolling, there is a little bit of shimmering, but because it's a 1080p output instead of 720p, there's more pixels overall. So the shimmering is generally less noticeable, I think, than some of the certain mini consoles perhaps.
We know this most on the game called Progear, which is a cave shooter with Capcom.
Progear had a lot of shimmering, but other games were less severe in this regard. There's also the smoothing mode though, and this is the most disappointing. There's no CRT filter, nothing like that. It's literally just a bilinear filter of the whole image. It blurs all the pixels together. Of course, there's no shimmering, but it doesn't look great to my eyes.
No, I didn't like that mode too much.
So
there are 6 different modes you can play with though.
So the video options are okay, but not exceptional. I just think the unscaled 4:3 option is, well, scaled, but the 4:3 option is my preferred way.
Same.
And it's mostly good with just a little bit of shimmering.
I think most people who will buy this unit too, they will prefer the original 4:3.
Yes. And honestly, emulation overall seems pretty good, I would say. What else? We played, of course. Actually, what about the fighting game? Progear, was it? No, that's the shooter.
No, you're talking about Cybots.
Cyberbots, that's the one. It's Cyberbots, which is a fighting game
Armored Warriors.
based on Armored Warriors. Yeah. And even, I think Jin from Marvel vs. Capcom appeared here first, perhaps.
It's a very interesting game because it's a heavier fighting game. A little bit like, did you ever play Mobile Suit Gundam V on Super Nintendo?
Yeah, there's that, or maybe even
like
Techromancer.
Something
that's a
like
3D
that,
game, of course. But it's this fast-paced, it uses fewer buttons.
It uses 4 buttons in total, 2 which are
but 2 are offensive,
yeah.
right? So it has a different flow than other Capcom fighters of the era, and that also has great sprite work. Unlike Armored Warriors, this actually did have a port to Saturn and PlayStation, which is cool. But again, throughout all of this, we did find emulation to be fairly accurate, but there were a few issues I noticed specifically. Maybe it's my setup, but basically occasionally the audio would drop out during gameplay. There's moments where you're playing and then all of a sudden it goes silent for a second. I tested it with multiple HDMI cables, but I should note that it does actually come with both HDMI and USB cables. And the key is that they're very, very long. Yes. The HDMI cable is twice as long, at least, compared to every other system you might have purchased. Obviously, being that the thing needs to be
the unit itself in your lap. Control, yeah.
Right, since that's the control, the cable needs to be long, and it is, and that's pretty cool.
I appreciate that they thought of that.
Because, it's a nice detail that they actually thought about ahead of time, and it works.
Yeah, but about the emulation quality, you know, John, I'm a pretty big Street Fighter player.
Oh, yes.
Pretty good at it.
You're pretty good.
And we figured to put this thing to the test, I would be playing Street Fighter. They use Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting.
Of course.
Also, we should note that there's only one Street Fighter on this unit. We figured there would be more.
Yeah,
I'm actually happy.
I respect that
yes.
they decided, they resisted this.
I'm surprised they didn't use Street Fighter 2 Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo, but I prefer Hyper Fighting anyway. But I was playing through that, played through the entire game on a few credits, and the emulation quality was really good. I would have noticed if there was some issues. We did notice though, there are a few graphical glitches on Street Fighter.
Yeah.
Where the screen kind of corrupts for half a frame.
Yeah, that's a very strange thing. You can see it here in the footage.
Yeah, I don't know. It didn't really do anything with gameplay. It was so quick that like you just noticed.
Right.
But yeah, that was the only thing. Another thing we should note that kind of became clear with Street Fighter is that there is no dip switch control here.
That's right.
And if you're playing one player, these games can be a bit tough.
Yeah, you're really good at Street Fighter, and Hyper Fighting was cranked up pretty high.
It was cranked up pretty high. I don't know what the default difficulty on Hyper Fighting is, but I'm guessing it is medium to hard, which on arcade is quite difficult.
Yes.
For me, it's okay, but I would guess that a casual player coming into Street Fighter 2 for the first time, a younger player,
they could be very frustrated.
It could be a bit intimidating.
Something to consider.
So a firmware update with a dip switch control to lower the difficulty would be good.
Yes. Now, one thing about this, again though, the library discovery, the game running behind us here is Capcom Sports
Club.
Sports Club. This is one I'd never actually played myself as well, and my goodness, this is one of the most entertaining arcade two-player games I've played in a while. It's basically, it has the same sort of like feeling as something like Windjammers. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's that same kind of intensity that you get in Windjammers.
It's a short but fast-paced
exactly.
sports experience.
So you got tennis, you've got soccer/football,
yes,
and you've got basketball. And so basketball is kind of like NBA Jam in a way, but it's like a light version of that.
Yeah,
but
it's not as deep. But
it's not as deep, but it's very fast-paced, very fun. When you jam through the hoop there, the way they like fade out the background. And by the way, in all 3 games, when you score, you see these beautiful sprites pop up every time.
And fall and be all like wavy.
It's so good looking. It's just beautiful. The soccer game as well. It's like a super fast-paced take on the game, and it's so fun.
It's a little bit like Kunio-kun soccer.
Yeah. It's fast, fluid, huge, colorful sprites, and the tennis is also solid, although perhaps the most challenging because the ball velocity is insane. Yeah. But it does feel, again, it has that same, you know, when a heated Windjammers game is going and the disc just slams at the other player, it kind of has that feeling.
Yeah, we kind of forgot time and just kept playing tennis for a long time, which is on an arcade unit like this. The fact that we end up playing tennis for so long is kind of humorous.
It's a great thing for it. So that is another fantastic game to check out.
I think most fans, though, John, would like to hear about Alien vs. Predator.
Alien vs. Predator is here, and you know it is. That's never had a home conversion before official.
So it was announced for Saturn in Japan at some point, but it never came out.
But yeah, it's a great beat 'em up.
It's definitely, I think, the peak of the belt-scrolling beat 'em up, isn't it?
Maybe.
I mean, I kind of prefer Armored Warriors, but I think for most people, in terms of
good.
Because the use of the license here is really well done.
It's very
probably
tasteful.
the best licensed video game of its era, isn't it?
Definitely one of the best. It's really impressive. It's a great looking game, huge colorful sprites.
Yeah.
And that's
lots of sprites too.
There's a ton of sprites on screen. I mean, these are all CPS2 games, sort of pushing that, and that's kind of the interesting mix. Is you play a game like that, you can also go back to Final Fight, which feels, and Captain Commando, which they're not bad, but they definitely feel their age. And the sound hardware back then, on CPS1 is very shrill.
Great compositions,
and also it has Ghouls and Ghosts.
Yeah, that's your type of game. I'm so bad at that.
I love that. That's a great game, great series, and obviously the arcade version is tremendous. That's a great pick. Super Puzzle Fighters on there.
Eco Fighters.
Eco Fighters, which is this strange take on the shooter genre where you sort of manipulate your aim, almost kind of like Zero Gunner 2 would be on the Dreamcast, but sort of a side-scrolling.
It feels like a mix of like Twinbee stylistically, not in terms of gameplay, but just like it's very happy, colorful. And then you have like the fish-ish design.
Yeah, it's like Twinbee plus Darius, so that's a cool thing as well. And I mean, we can go on and on about this, but the point is the game selection is really, really interesting. It's very well curated, and it sort of explores part of Capcom's arcade history that isn't usually sort of discussed as much.
Yeah.
So I think there's actually room for discovery here. I mean, you still have your Street Fighter, AVP and all that, but you have these other games as well, like the sports game and Armored Warriors and whatnot. It's a good selection. So
yeah, because we went in with favorites, but we ended up playing new games that we hadn't really discovered, and that's a huge praise for this game.
And when you combine that with the really nice Sanwa controls and the hefty bass, it's actually a really nice experience. And I even spent some time playing this connected up to my FW900 CRT.
Of course you did.
Which was that's a great way to play it. You get the super smooth scrolling, and it feels just right on there. And input latency. As usual for these SoCs, there is some latency. That's just how it is when you have a frame buffer. You're drawing it. It's there. It's not severe. It's similar or less than something like the Mega Drive Mini, I'd say.
I'd say it was very similar.
It's very similar to that.
I could still beat Street Fighter on it, so I'll take that.
Yes. So you feel a little bit of latency, but it's no different than what you've experienced in these other things, and it's totally workable. So not a big deal.
So do you think in a future firmware update they could add games to this?
That's what I'm wondering. I mean, conceivably, yes, because this actually has an online infrastructure, if it works, plus that extra USB port, who knows what it's for. There's potential there, but we don't know. But yeah, summary then. Basically, well-built unit, great controls, but some quirks. We got sound dropouts sometimes. We had the frame skip thing that we had to fix with resetting. The Wi-Fi didn't seem to work correctly, and the scaling isn't perfect, among other little things. All they're issues, so it's not a perfect unit, but the overall build quality and the general video output is good enough, and the emulation is solid enough that it does feel well made. It's on par with the other mini consoles, like the better ones.
The better ones.
It's not like the PlayStation Classic. It's a good mini console style design, but with a really superior control mechanism. And it does actually really recreate that sort of arcade feel. Yeah. There's other devices like this out there, but this is, sort of a licensed by Capcom thing. The design, we've talked about that a little bit, but it's actually a slightly smaller unit than it might seem in the photos, so it's not as ridiculous.
And it's heavy enough that, as we mentioned at the beginning, it doesn't slide around.
Exactly.
And the distance is good. The placement of the buttons is good, and you don't really have to travel too much, which is very important.
Exactly.
So yeah, this is a well-designed, it's not a beautiful design, but it's a well-working design.
So that's kind of where I'm at on it. That's just, I think our opinion is that it's a good product, but not a perfect one. It has its flaws, but it's still worth checking out. It's just, I mean, the price is maybe a tad steep. It's around $200 or so.
Yeah. But
depending on where you order from.
But with these parts and the emulation quality, I wouldn't say it's that high of a price.
No, that's the thing. You still have these other mini consoles that come in at maybe a little less than half the price. Yeah. But when you couple this with the extra Sanwa parts and the big bass, it's not a bad deal. So I'll be curious to see what other people think of this. But for me, it's a great way to sort of revisit Capcom's arcade lineup
and discovering new ones.
And discovering new ones, and it's a fun product to use. So I definitely. If this sounds like something you might enjoy, it's not a bad thing to own, and I could definitely see myself busting this out in the future for some two-player action. It's great to have somebody to play with on something like this. It does recreate that arcade sort of feel.
Yeah, for me, I never heard of it before you showed it to me, and now I definitely have to pick one up. I can't wait to play some Street Fighter with my brother, like back in the day.
It's cool.
And, yeah.
All right, well, that's going to do it for this sort of focus on hardware today. So if you enjoyed this video, as always, be sure to like and subscribe, ring the notification bell at the top, follow us over on Twitter. And of course, until next time, stay retro.